Welcome to the channel and welcome to this army overview of my new Space Marines force. Named the Shadows of Ultramar. I'm going to go through why I've decided to collect a Space Marine army, why they're called what they are, why they're painted in the colours that they are, and a little bit of backstory about what makes them tick, what are their battle doctrines, and how they approach warfare in the 41st millennium. So this force is my third 40k army, Thousand Suns being my first and Orcs being my second. I decided to collect Space Marines because I felt I should have some Imperial forces on my channel. There's an awful lot of Thousand Suns and Orc content, and I thought it was about time that the defenders of mankind turned up and made their presence known. Of course, they are the poster boys of 40k and always well looked after by Games Workshop in terms of models and, generally speaking, rules. Although they've not been singing too much in the meta recently, I'm recording this video a few days after they've dropped was it Armor of Contempt rules, which is going to really help, I think, the Space Marines and also actually my Thousand Suns. Which basically means that they can reduce an AP coming in by 1. But yes, I did think about fielding Imperial Guard or some of the other Imperial factions. I really like the Imperial Guard, but I felt that Space Marines is an army I can get painted relatively quickly in order to get that variation on the channel. And who doesn't love Space Marines? My first ever 40k army was a White Scars army back in 2nd edition. Back then, they didn't have a lot of the sort of fluff that they have now in terms of like being space Mongols. Yeah, they were my first army, so I've always loved Space Marines. And you know, who doesn't? Like the defenders of humanity, they are such an icon of the 40k of the 41st millennium. So yeah, that's why I decided to choose Space Marines. In terms of the paint scheme, I was just having a think about what colours might work together and also what colours might work in relation to some of my other armies. So if I just bring in an Orc Knob here, I just felt that they would work quite nicely together on the battlefield and stand out being quite different. Also, if I bring in a Scarabocop Terminator, again, they're sort of sufficiently different, I think, to look good in the battlefield when playing against my other armies. In terms of what units to field in the army, some of that's been dictated by the Imperium magazine, which I am subscribed to. But I did want to sort of play a relatively gun-line static army. Not necessarily the best way to play 40k at the moment. Those armies that are highly mobile seem to be doing better than ones that are stand back and trudging slowly in gun lines. But for me, I've always really loved that concept of a thin line of power armor holding back hordes of aliens, orcs in particular, or tyranids, and sort of having that gun line. So that's really what I wanted this army to be like. So it is very infantry heavy, as you can see. It's very got lots of shooty weapons, not so much close assault, although I do have a little bit, just to create a bit of a speed bump. And like all my armies, it's not completely finished yet. There'll be more units being added to it. But I thought this is a good opportunity to explain where these Space Marines have come from and what they are, what their doctrines are like on the battlefield. So they are named the Shadows of Ultramar, and as the name suggests, their gene seed has been taken from a Rabute Guilliman, who has returned back to life and is leading the Indomitus Crusade. They were the Space Marine chapter was created specifically for the Indomitus Crusade, and whilst they draw their recruits from Ultramar generally, They are a fleet-based chapter attached to one of the Indomitus fleets, and usually operate in Imperium Sanctus, I want to say, which is a slightly safer part of the Imperium. The chapter is entirely Primaris based, having stopped playing 40k in 2nd edition and only started again in 8th edition. I didn't have that sort of emotional attachment to classic Marines like a lot of other players have, so I was more than happy just to keep going with the Primaris Marines, although I do think we need drop pods for Primaris Marines. I don't think there's Space Marines without drop pods. But anyway, so yeah, entirely Primaris. They are taken, they have the gene seed of the Ultramarines, of course, of Guilliman, and they do share a lot of the Ultramarines attributes in terms of their organisation, their genuine care for the wider Imperium. Obviously, some Space Marine chapters are very insular, don't really get too much involved in humanity, the wider species of humanity, and do their own thing. But these Space Marines are very much like Ultramarines in terms of their organisation and their care for the wider Imperium in terms of trying to defend all of humanity from the Xenos and Chaos threat. When the first units of this Space Marine chapter were being created, and before they were fully fledged and independent chapter on their own accord, some units were sent to train and fight alongside the Raptors chapter. Hold on a second. And the Raptors chapter, as some of you may know, are a Raven Guard successor chapter, and it is the early training that the Shadows of Ultramar had with this chapter that very much then informed the development of their own combat doctrine. So even though they are have the gene seed of Guilliman, they share many attributes with Raven Guard chapters in terms of wanting to strike from the shadows and using covert guerrilla style tactics. The Raptors specifically prize skilled marksmanship and independent thought, and view the Codex Astartes as a highly effective set of guidelines rather than an absolute doctrine. And that is very much how the Shadows of Ultramar also view their combat doctrine, and also the Codex Astartes, which creates their first paradox, because even though they are from Guilliman stock, they don't necessarily follow the Codex Astartes at all. And that's most shown up in their refusal to wear any insignia that you would expect from a Codex compliant chapter. There is no chapter badge on their left pauldron, and they don't have markings which show what company the units come from. All of that information is only kept within the auspexes of their battle suits, so they themselves can look upon one of their fellow brothers and know precisely which company and unit he belongs to, but no one else does. Okay, so the reason for that is, having been created for the Indomitus Crusade, they have seen the Imperium crumble and shrink in size and power for, well, 10,000 years, gradually things becoming more and more desperate, and with the Cicatrix Maledictum splitting the universe, or sorry, the galaxy in two, then things have got so dire that the chapter command secretly, they don't announce this to the world, secretly consider that the experiment that their own Gene Father initiated with splitting up the legions into smaller chapters and following the Codex Astartes has not necessarily achieved the results that are required to save humanity. And they look back further in time to their combat doctrine, and are very much of the view that Space Marine legions were the way that humanity created the Imperium. Space Marine legions were the manner in which all is Xenos and well, I wouldn't say chaos because we obviously know what happened, that were pushed back and the fight taken to the enemy. And it was during this period that humanity was ascendant. So whilst they do not advocate for the return of legion size Space Marine chapters, they do consider that chapter of Space Marines 1000 is not sufficient to hold back the tide against humanity, and they have secretly even from the early outset of their creation, breached those rules, and there are certainly more than 1000 Space Marines in this particular Space Marine chapter. So their combat doctrine is broadly more in line with the Principia Bellicosa, which is the doctrine that existed before the Codex Astartes doctrine came into being, and it is pretty much based on the belief that all you really need to defeat the foes of humanity is a ton of Space Marines armed with bolt guns. So that is kind of reflected in this army, in that there is a large preponderance of bulk weaponry. It worked before, and there's no reason why it should work again. That's their view. Of course, in reality, humanity is in desperate perils, and I don't think anything that this particular Space Marine chapter will ever do anything to stop that. But that is the way that they view combat, and accordingly, they do put a lot of emphasis in marksmanship, and perhaps to the sacrifice of other sort of combat doctrines such as close assault. So their chapter tactic will always be bolter discipline, which basically means I can re-roll ones for any bolt weapon fired. So that includes all the bolt rifles, bolt pistols, heavy bolters, etc. They also are master artisans, which means I can re-roll a failed hit per unit per turn. So that would be not just ones that are, if a 2 misses, I could re-roll 1, but that counts with all weapons. So that include the plasma annihilator, I think that's called, and the big tank weapon as well. So they have put a lot of emphasis in shooting and standing back and annihilating the enemy at range. So it is usually only after achieving some form of veteran status that Space Marines of this chapter take up any sort of close assault specialisms. You'll notice that the sergeants in each of these squads have a completely blue helmet, and the assault intercessors all have blue helmets. That is because in this chapter the rank of a sergeant is in effect the same as the rank of an assault marine. So these guys are effectively the elites and sergeants all banded together, and sometimes they will be told to lead intercessor squads or hellblasters, and other times they will form up and create their own assault squads, but they are fairly few and far between, and the bulk of the chapter being taken up with intercessors, standard intercessors. Okay, that's basically it. They are don't have a very good relationship, or have a very poor relationship with the Sisters of Battle. They are very secular. They call, like most Space Marines, they do not believe the Emperor is a god, particularly as Guilliman has returned, and there is a direct link to the 31st millennium, and they see that the religiosity of the Imperium they believe has been an impediment to its success and enable to fight off the Xenos and Chaos, well, certainly the Xenos threat, and perhaps the Chaos threat as well. They have a slightly better relationship with the Adeptus Mechanicum. view their war gear particularly as requiring rites and the religious side of the Omnissiah that the Mechanicum deal with, but they do understand the value of the Mechanicum and their ability to provide this chapter with the war gear that it needs. So they do have a slightly better relationship with the Mechanicum, and have a fairly good relationship with the wider Imperial Armed Forces of the Navy and the Imperial Guard. Okay, so what do we have here? The army is led by Captain Tarentus. If I can. Okay, Captain Tarentus is a standard Primaris captain armed with a mastercrafted bolt rifle and a mastercrafted power sword. He tends to have the armor Indomitus as his relic, and tends to have the Imperium sword, I think, as his warlord trait, which makes him a little bit punchier in combat. The idea with the characters generally is they are countercharge units. Invariably units will be coming in that haven't been destroyed by the firepower, and their job is to sort of plug any gaps and sort of counter punch. Not really much to say about any of these characters yet because I haven't had a lot of time on the battlefield. I'm hoping to do a sort of almost like a training exercise battle with the Custodes and number 2 tomorrow, so that'd be interesting to see how that fares. But yeah, he's commander of the 3rd company. Not that you'd know it because there's nothing on his armor to show that, but that's who he is. And the other HQs I have is Librarian Numinous. Now he's in Phobos armor. Again, that's a sort of Imperium magazine miniature, so I don't have any other Phobos units in the army, although actually it would sort of be in keeping with the doctrine of the army, so maybe I should get a few more of them. There isn't a huge Librarius, I want to say, in the chapter. They're not massively psychically powerful this particular chapter, but they have a small cadre. And he is a member of that cadre. He's armed with a mastercrafted power sword as standard. Now the lieutenant, this is Lieutenant Vespid. He has appeared on the channel. He did a heroic job fighting against some orcs, taking down a number of key units and orcs in that battle before being removed as a casualty. So he is very much looking forward to eventually becoming a captain in his own right, should Captain Tarentus fall, or if another captain from a different company also fall, then he is a rising star in the chapter. The apothecary Vespiad, he is a chapter's chief apothecary, and invariably, because of the amount of infantry I have, I'll be running him using the strategy, the 0 CP strategy, enabling him to pick up infantry for free. That will usually require me to spend a command point on him to have a warlord trait, Heroes of the Imperium, I think, or chapter. But yeah, I mean, it's a fairly common tactic used by Space Marine players with large amount of bikes and infantry, so that's going to be happening quite regularly in this army. So they're the 4 characters. I do have another captain that I'm painting up, who I'm likely to create as a chapter master, in effect. So if I do decide to upgrade a captain to be chapter master, then I'll probably incorporate that miniature, but he's still not been painted yet. So as discussed so far, this is an infantry heavy list. I've got 2 squads of 10 intercessors, and standard bolt rifle loadout. I know there are a few other things you can use, but I think bolt rifles are probably the best loadout. I do have a few spare sergeants with chainswords, so I could swap them out if necessary, if I want to upgrade the sergeant, keeping with the blue helmet, etc. So yeah, also unit of 10 Hellblasters. Well, they're really powerful, aren't they? And although they're not quite the unit in 40k as they used to be, I still think they are a proper top flight unit in any army. So they're armed with assault plasma annihilators. They're the strength 6 free, assault free, strength 6, -4, 1 damage weapons. I think they're probably the best loadout. Although I was quite tempted with the heaviest version, but I think the amount of firepower these guys kick out is probably is going to be more than enough to take out heavy elites and infantry and that kind of thing. So as I've also discussed, here is a squad of 10 assault intercessors, quite rare in the army, and won't necessarily be fielded that often, but in terms of just having an effective army that could win games, you do need a little bit of a speed bump. So if I'm facing against orcs or tyranids or something like that, you do need to shove some units ahead of your gun line, otherwise you're going to be pinned back into the battlefield. So they do have that important role to play. Then finally, in the elite slots, I've got I've forgotten what these are called. Aggressors. Yes, aggressors. So I've got 1 unit of 3 flamestorm aggressors and 1 unit of bolt storm gauntlet aggressors. Probably, given the chapter tactic, the bolt storm aggressors will probably be fielded more often than the flamestorm. Well, they are pretty useful auto hits. That's 66 auto hits coming in from these guys. So they've also got power fists as well, and toughness 5 3 wounds. So they're pretty chunky, quite durable. I don't really have any weaknesses other than perhaps there's not many of them. But yeah, they can take on armor, they can take on, well, certainly the Flamestorm can take on mass infantry. And they're pretty tough, hard to shift, so they're pretty good. And then finally we've got, not quite finally, we've got a Dreadnought, a Redemptor Dreadnought. Now, this is the first time I ever magnetized a model, but I have magnetized him, so I've got the ability to exchange his weaponry. In fact, I can also change that to the flamer and indeed the nipple guns as well. I can change out. So I can completely can change flexible in terms of its loadout. Although I think I probably do have enough anti-infantry, so most likely I'm not going to be taking the plasma cannon to give myself a little bit of anti-armor, also with his power fist as well. Yeah, useful unit because there are stratagems which allow you to reroll ones and hits and or wounds with Wisdom of the Ancients. And then finally, the Repulsor Executioner, again to give me some backfield Dakka. Really good unit, so many weapons. You have to have a good lie down after rolling all the dice once you finish the shooting phase of one of them. Because it's got the repulsor field. I think there's a really good strategy which adds 2 inches to any charge against it, and it has the machine spirit keyword, so you can spend command points to put it on its top bracket for shooting purposes. If it has been taken fire and is damaged. So I think all around a pretty good unit. I think probably arguably better than the Land Raider. I would probably say so, but obviously you may have a different opinion. So yeah, so that's it as present. It's not quite finished. Oh, one thing I was going to say, one other reason why we are not Codex compliant in terms of the Codex Astartes is that the librarian is not all blue, although there is a blue pauldron to represent that he is a member of the Librarius, and indeed that's also follows suit in the Apothecary with his white pauldron. And if I can just turn that around, because this is technically a tech marine, he's also got the red of Mars on his pauldron up there, so there is a sort of nod to what colours they should be, but again they don't follow all the rules. There we go. I hope you like the army. I'm looking forward to seeing it in action. This is army number 3. I've already decided army number 4 is going to be Necrons, and probably army number 5 is going to be the Adeptus Mechanicus, but we will see. I'm not entirely sure about the 5th army yet, but hopefully they will add a little bit more variation to the battle reports as they keep coming in. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully you'll see them in action against the Custodes shortly, and thereafter against anyone else who would like to take them on. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.